Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Bruni, and joining me once again is Billy Embody. And Billy, we have a mailbag edition of the podcast. Shay and I usually run it, but Shay is over in Europe doing God knows what. And so here we are. How are you doing?
Doing well, not as well as Shay is over there in Italy, I think, right now. But
Nobody is.
we got to get you over there. Now we've had
Yeah.
the Bengal Tiger crew, 2 of the 3, go over to Europe at some point. So you're up next. Backpack
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Put it on the On3 tab.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. There's
send me
got to be
over
some euros that
there.
LSU basketball is targeting, right?
There you go. Yeah. Mailbag edition of the podcast. We posted on our board. Obviously, these are for subscribers that can post questions to us. So if you want to submit a question, or if you just want to get in on the Bengal Tiger on 3 family, you can. Just like Billy's showing you right there, the founders hat. You can subscribe over there. Are we still running the 6 months for $30? Is that
Oh
still
yeah,
going there? So there you
people are
go.
jumping on it
Yeah.
left and right.
Yeah, so join that. We can get right into it. We got a lot of questions. We appreciate all the questions. We opened it up to everything. You know, Shay and I usually just do football, but we opened it up to basketball, opened it up to recruiting. So we got a little bit of everything for y'all on this podcast. First, Damon Tigerin. Any names I butcher.
Targaryen.
Targaryen. All right, there you go. See, this is why Shay usually reads them because I don't read the names. What are our biggest obstacles to making a playoff in 2023? We always get a playoff question in these. The biggest obstacle to me, other than the SEC schedule, which is obviously brutal, I think that's probably the first. Like, you can just drop games in the SEC and not be a bad team. We saw Alabama last year was probably a playoff quality team, but you lose to LSU on the road, you lose to Tennessee on the road. Those type of things happen. So I'd say that's number one. If we're looking as far as team goes, I'd say depth of and concern of injury, probably at positions like offensive line, positions like secondary, running back to a degree. So I think that's probably the number ones for me. I think somebody mentioned it, but receiver, even though I like the receiver room at LSU a lot, I think it's great room, top 10 room. If Malik Neighbors has to miss any time or Brian Thomas misses any time, you do get kind of into that shallower realm there pretty quickly. But that's probably what I got.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year it honestly didn't matter if they beat Florida State in the end. It was all about obviously that loss to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So you've got to handle the games that you're supposed to win. That's first and foremost. I know Captain Obvious here saying that, but I think as far as biggest obstacles, getting the season off to the right start, beating Florida State, which it looks like the Seminoles will be one of those top teams in the ACC when it's all said and done, and especially what they've added in the portal, that's going to be a potential signature win early on, one that the committee looks back on. And let's say if LSU makes it to Atlanta again and faces a Georgia team and is unable to get by the Bulldogs, and look, they're on a heater. They need that extra signature win. If they can get through the rest of their schedule unscathed and put all that together, the way they need to be in the playoff conversation, having that signature win, even then a loss to Georgia in the SEC championship would probably put them in the playoff. That's just looking without knowing where everybody else is. But if that's this year, they're probably in the college football playoff, is my guess. If they're just a one-loss team, with that one loss being to Georgia. So on the schedule, that's my obstacle. Is I would love to see LSU get that signature win early in the year. Obviously, then you got to navigate the rest of the way and win out in the SEC and do those things. But as far as the roster goes, I agree with you. You got to stay injury free, and especially at those positions. An obstacle is something that LSU's been working to overcome. Would love to see Jaden Daniels push the ball down the field more. Give them a more dynamic offense. Over the course of the whole field. Make defenses defend you a little bit more across and down the field, and down the field passing would be that. And I think the secondary stepping up is the other obstacle. That's what needs to happen. lot of new guys in that mix. And if they put it together and they stay healthy, then that's another obstacle that would be overcome for me.
Yep. Zud the Hut, can you give us a projection on the all-important opening game against Florida State? I don't have one right now, but I mean, I think on paper LSU should be favored slightly. Which I think they are. I think they're 2-point favorite, something like that. I don't know, but I think that's about right now. But Florida State has reloaded really, really well, just like LSU has. It's gonna be I just can't wait for this game.
Yeah, and it's a Florida State team, and we'll start doing some early looks at the teams on the schedule and things like that as June gets going, because quite frankly, schools are still adding out of the transfer
Yep.
portal, as we've seen. So there could be a guy that pops in, a graduate, who knows, that can help LSU, can help Florida State, can help teams across the country. But early projection, I think this is a Florida State team that is starting to gain a little bit of confidence under Mike Norvell, which can always be a little dangerous at times. They've added a lot of quality players through the transfer portal. And, quite honestly, this is a Florida State team that is once again going to give LSU a tough test. I agree LSU should be favorite slightly in this one, but I think we're in for a real treat in that matchup. So I don't really think we answered as far as the projection goes. I haven't dug too deep into what Florida State is looking like heading into 2023, but I think they're going to be one of the better teams in the ACC.
That's going to be an awesome game. I mean,
Yeah.
Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels. A lot of, the receivers in that game are elite. The defensive line talent in that game is awesome. All right. 318 Tiger. If you could bring back one player from last year's team to join this one, who would it be? For me, the answer is very straightforward and simple. I'm going BJ Ojolari. And especially when you consider the jack position just is so uncertain right now. I'm not going to say it's bad. I'm not going to say it's good, but it's definitely a question mark for me when you look at Swinson and Ogofu, even though I think they are good players. And you throw Deshaun Womack in there, even though he's probably defensive end right now. I think if you just add BJ Ojolari to this team, it answers one question that I have.
Yeah, and not to piggyback off you, but to piggyback off you, I agree. BJ Ojolari would 100% be that guy for me. I will add Jurick Bernard Converse, maybe get some secondary help in there, and he would be, I guess, he would be more of a dark horse, I guess, outside the obvious, which is BJ.
Yeah, maybe Jay Ward or something for the safety position. So that way you can slide Greg Brooks back to nickel. That'd be kind of interesting. Coach K7. Now with each of their systems in place and added depth at a lot of positions, what differences should we see from the OC and DC in year 2 play calling scheme aspect? I think we already know with Denbrock. I think Denbrock is put in a lot of what he wanted to do last year, actually, from a fundamental standpoint of whether that's the RPOs, whether that is a quarterback run game, which has been a staple for him the past few years. I think from a run game perspective in general, he got a lot of what he wanted in there. The main thing with him, the difference between what we saw from Desmond Ridder and Jaden Daniels, I think, was the vertical passing game. And I think we even saw that with Garrett Nussmeier in there. It's not that they weren't trying to, it's kind of they just had to tailor their offense to Jaden Daniels. And that's what Jaden was giving you, and that's what they took. But overall, I think we saw a lot of what he wanted to do. I watched one of those clips of him explaining his offense. You know how all the coaches do at their coaches' clinics, but the RPO stuff is, I think, maybe something they could add more of. But overall, I think it's pretty much the same. Defensively, it'll be interesting now because you have Harold Perkins at middle linebacker, and that's a huge change because you can use him in different ways than what they did last year with their linebackers. But overall, I think you saw last year what they did at Kentucky, and so from a scheme standpoint, I think you're going to see a lot of the same schematically, but you have Harold Perkins at inside linebacker. So how do you want to use him? That could change the defense a little bit.
Yeah, I think another thing is, and we talked about, rosters not necessarily being done. If LSU can add Connor Gilbreth out of the from the JUCO ranks, that might allow Mike Denbrock to play a little bit more two tight end sets with more success and kind of more physicality in the run game, and kind of maybe changing maybe the percentages as far as what he does play calling wise. If you have a 6'6", 260-pound
Yeah.
true, run blocker tight end. That might give them a little bit of a different feel offensively from a physicality standpoint. But yeah, I think they want to push the ball down the field a little bit more. But I'm with you. I think the makeup, the look is very much in place. And I think to an extent, the same can be said for Matt House. One thing that we're seeing as far as their roster building goes is adding many different body types and guys that can play in different matchups and different sub packages and things like that. And as you move Harold Perkins to middle linebacker, all right, now you've got to get that production from Ovie Oghoufo and Braden Swinson off the jack position. Does Harold Perkins move around and back there at certain packages? Does that bring Omar Speights down in the in on more packages because of that? More of an every down backer for LSU. Greg Penn's back. How does that impact? How does Harold Perkins impact those guys and kind of their rotation early on? Whit Weeks, had a pick six in the spring game. A guy that can really, really run. If they're in a passing down situation, does he get some more burn out there in coverage? I just think they potentially the rotating around the defense might look a little different this year, but that's more of a hunch rather than a schematic look. But I do think they want different sub packages, and I think the way they've kind of addressed the roster might yield that a little bit more.
Yeah. All right. Misled Alarm has 4, so we can speed through these 4. Why do y'all think there's a rise in O-line talent in the state? It's his first one there, so I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I think there's always been guys that are on the radar for LSU, but you never necessarily know if they should be a take at the time coming out of high school. Osiris Torrance is an example of this. You see them taking in the past the kind of premier offensive lineman from the state, like the young one. So, for example, in this class, the guy that's been on the radar for the most part from the get-go has been Kyrie Lee. They take him, they get him committed. They did that with Cardell Thomas. They did that with Thomas Perry. They've jumped at the early, well-known offensive linemen in the state. And so I think from our perspective, we don't necessarily think of the state as much as far as offensive line producing when LSU signs 1 or 2 from the state. Now, last year they were obviously very lucky. Zalance Hurd, Tyree Adams, even the I should say 2023 class, Zalance Hurd, Tyree Adams. The year before that, Will Campbell, Emory Jones. Those are no-brainer guys start to finish in their evaluation process. I think the state, and because of the way LSU recruits the offensive linemen in the state, the guys that maybe come up a little under the radar don't necessarily get as much buzz around them. But I think we're seeing that as now, especially we get back out on the road, COVID's over, all that stuff, we are discovering more and more offensive linemen in the state of Louisiana. So I think it's a little bit – I think the state has produced enough offensive linemen. I just think at times LSU has jumped on the early one and with good results. Will Campbell, Emory Jones, obviously Zalance Hurd, Tyree Adams, mixed bag, Thomas Perry, Cardell Thomas, guys like that, and we'll see on Kyrie Lee. But we look at the state in 2024, for example, you got Jude Foster at Southern Lab. You got Joe Cryer, who I think transferred to Natchitoches Central. Yes, he did. From Manny, he's been on the radar a minute. Mitch Hodnett up in the Monroe area at Sterlington is a guy who's certainly on LSU's radar. Kavion Broussard at Zachary's on LSU's radar. There are guys out there, and I'm missing a couple, but there are guys out there that are on the radar, have Power 5 offers for the most part. So I don't know if it's necessarily as much a change as far as the amount of talent. I just think they're being discovered because we're out more, coaches are out more, and I think that's just kind of how the cookie is crumbled in a sense. Devin Harper in 2025 is a 4-star out of Captain Shreve. So I think it's just people getting back into the evaluation period a little bit more and being able to get out and we're seeing kind of the fruits of that come to the forefront.
Yeah. All right. His second question. Who do y'all think is the most important commit LSU has landed so far in 2024?
That'd
So
be
most important.
most important.
Obviously I'm gonna defer to you here, but I do like their tight end additions here off the bat. And then Kalaj Cobbins has also been one that from what I've seen, I've been impressed with. Flipping Juwan Johnson, that getting him in the class feels like a big get. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, long term, because in 2024, they now have Colin Hurley committed at quarterback. I think he's a very important commitment. He is taking an active role recruiting. I do want to see kind of the fruits of that and what that brings this summer. He's recruiting Cam Coleman really hard. He's pushing for a lot of guys around the country to come check out LSU and give them a even more serious look than they already are. So, if Colin Hurley delivers a Cam Coleman, I think that puts him right at the top as far as most important recruits. And, we could talk about, what he needs to do as a senior to continue to show development and things like that. But your quarterback is your leader in your class. And if he can bring the guys that he's trying to bring, that'll be huge. As far as overall most important recruit from a need, from a just overall battle perspective, I love that they've been able to hold on to Maurice Williams right now. They got him on board early. I saw his dad even tweeted that there's an LSU flag outside of his house right now. So he's been pretty quiet. He's been one of those guys that I think is most definitely still getting recruited heavily by other programs. But I think he's going to be a really, really good player. Him and Deshaun McBride are two of the best commits in the class. And I just think those two guys are really, really important long-term for LSU on the defensive side.
Yeah. Is it realistic to expect LSU to contend this year? Feels a little too soon. I feel like we're missing something. No, I don't think I do think it's realistic. I don't think it's too soon. I do think it's realistic. We saw last year that they're able to. You have to get those wins, the win over Alabama, the win over Florida State, like we talked about. And those can go either way in year to year. Some years they'll win them, some years they won't. That's just kind of how the SEC plays. That's how your schedule plays. So, yeah, I definitely think it's realistic because I think they can win the Florida State game. I think they can win the Alabama game again. So, will they? I can't guarantee that, but they are in position to contend. I think it's realistic. Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's realistic. I mean, we saw them get fairly close. I mean, if they beat Texas A&M, they're good. There's a
Think
chance
about if
they're
they
in the
would have
college.
beaten. Think about if they had beaten Florida State, and then obviously beating Texas A&M, but even like before that Texas A&M game, how high would they have been ranked after beating Alabama? Like,
If they had been undefeated, they probably would have been 2 or 3. I
that's
would
what I'm
think,
saying.
right?
Like, yeah, they're right there. So in theory, they're blocked extra point away from being top 3, top 4 in the country for a lot of the year. And then if they lose to A&M, they lose to A&M. But sure, but that's a very different perception of the season, even though they were top 10 for a lot of it.
Yeah. So I think it's realistic. I don't think it's too soon either.
Covert Maple, which under the radar player do you think can make an all-conference claim this year? All right, let me pull up the depth chart real quick.
While you think on that, I will say a quick answer to Miss Led's protein powder. I'm just a GNC guy. That's it. Just a regular GNC protein powder.
Protein powder.
Yeah.
I just load up on the chicken and rice. Just load up.
All au natural. Under the radar player, one on each side of the ball.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think. Potential all-conference player. Give me. I think we'll make it already. I'll go with I'll go with Brian Thomas. I think Brian Thomas could have a big year.
Yeah, I think he could sneak onto a all SEC team. I will say Aaron Anderson. I mean, he missed the spring. If he comes back healthy, I know that might not be under the radar, but he hasn't played a ton.
The only players I think are on the radar for a all SEC team right now is Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Will Campbell on offense.
Mason Taylor. No. Oh.
Going into the year, he's not going to be all SEC, is he? That's top two tight end in the SEC.
Yeah, because Brock Bowers is back.
Brock Bowers is back as one, and then there's I'm sure there's a second. I'd have to think about it, but there's
Yeah.
I that's asking a lot. To be a
Might have
top
to
2 player,
stuff the ballots on that one. Maybe he gets
stuff the
on there.
balance. I like Mason Taylor, but that's
Savion Jones on defense
okay. Yeah.
could be an under the radar type. I mean, he's was a 5-star for On3 coming out. He's just continued to kind of trend the right way. I feel like I know a starter might not be necessarily the under the radar play, but I think it could be.
I mean, that counts for me.
Maybe
Like I
Greg
said,
Brooks. Maybe Greg Brooks.
yeah. Anybody who's not already like on our radar, like, okay, this guy should be an all conference player counts to me. So I like Savion Jones. I like that pick. Tiger 2B12 has 3 questions. Update on Casey Poe and Jonathan Daniels. If you want to give a quick update on them.
Yeah, Casey Poe is the number 1 interior offensive lineman out of Lindale, Texas, and people are not going to like this most likely, but he is going to he is trying to fit in an LSU official visit. So that kind of shows you where LSU stands in his recruitment. He has 5 set up right now. He has been he was just in Athens this past weekend for an official visit, or no, he was there for an unofficial visit. Or no, he was just there for an official visit. Okay. So he was at Georgia. Then he heads to Clemson. He's got Auburn. He's got Alabama. He's got Texas Tech. He's got OU the last weekend of July as well. I think Alabama is starting to make a move to land him. I would say OU is in there as well. But I just think it's kind of clear right now that LSU's playing catch up with Casey Poe. With John Daniels, they're more right in the mix, but Florida State is going to be tough to beat. John Daniels is the 5-star offensive tackle out of Pensacola, Florida. And fun story, I'm actually going to go I'm going down to the Panhandle this weekend to see my grandmother, and the head coach of Pine Forest, where John Daniels goes, owns a cigar bar in I'm talking 3 minutes from my grandmother's. So,
oh man, this is perfect.
Yeah. So I'm going to pop in there either Saturday or Sunday and have a stogie with him, and we'll chop it up. But LSU's right in the mix for John Daniels. They everybody, it seems like, is chasing Florida State, but Georgia's in there, Miami's in there. There's a bunch of schools that are working on him. How many will they sign? This is kind of a tough question. They've got 15 commits already. There's no signing class limit. And it just seems like the number of players LSU's in on, I could kind of see between like 27 to 31 if they really clean up. And that's before you get to the transfer portal. So it's pretty wild, just kind of how many players they could sign. But
yeah, if y'all haven't already, check out Billy's class prediction story that came out yesterday. So
yeah, and I think there were 34 in there, but we don't do decommitments in there. So there'll probably be a couple guys that drop off here and there. I mean, we've talked about JoJo Stone taking visits, Zion Ferguson taking visits, Xavier Adkins has official visit set. So I think that 27 to 31 range.
Who are the true corners we have a good chance of signing? Really like Crawford's his last one.
Yeah, Jalen Crawford definitely in the mix for LSU. He is a guy that has long had LSU near the top. I think Auburn and Clemson are probably the 2 biggest challengers for him, and I just kind of get a feeling he's going to be tough to pull out of Georgia, in the sense that Auburn is right down the street. Clemson's done a really nice job recruiting him. And he's got 4 official visits. He's got LSU, he's got Auburn, North Carolina, and Florida. So Clemson doesn't have an official visit set yet, but they're right in there as well. So that one's going to be intriguing. That one's going to be an interesting one. The other top corners they're after is Kai Bates out of the Orlando area in Florida. He's a top 200 overall prospect. He's really been on the rise lately. And I think he's going to finish as a top 100 prospect in my mind, especially on the On3 industry ranking. LSU is going to host him for an official visit. They're really, really starting to make a push there. He is looking at the likes of Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama has now offered him, Texas A&M, Ohio State. So he's really blown up now. And then kind of Wardell Mack is a defensive back. He's corner, could play safety. And then he's in New Orleans. He's a 5-star for On3 if the rankings ended today. And then two kind of dream lands out of Texas would be Kobe Black, who's a 5-star, top 20 overall prospect, and then Selman Bridges, who they're right pretty much from the same area there in Central Texas. He's a top 50 overall prospect, and I think that's it. The only other one that I'll note is PJ Woodland, who's out of Mississippi, who just picked up an LSU offer, and the Tigers, I think, are going to push Mississippi State, Texas. Those are two other schools to watch there.
Yeah. Covert Maple asked, which players do you think LSU sends to Hoover for SEC Media Days? They sent 3 last time, I believe. I think it was 3. Jaden Daniels obviously will be one. The other 2, I mean, Harold Perkins if they can get him, but they haven't really pushed for many interviews for Harold Perkins, so maybe not him. But I feel like from a national media perspective, they're gonna be like, "Oh, we got to have Harold Perkins and Jaden Daniels." So they might push Harold out of his comfort zone and push him over there. Who would be a third? Malik? I'm trying to remember who.
I don't think they'll send Malik.
Yeah, I don't think they'll send Malik either.
Love my man, but don't think they're doing that this year.
Will Campbell is a pretty good interview. That would make sense to me.
I would say they'll send Jaden Daniels. I would not sleep on Greg Brooks. And or Greg Penn maybe.
Yeah,
or
if we're
Mason,
just going from
or Mason Smith. Yeah. And then I do think either Mason Taylor or Will Campbell will be one.
Yeah, Mason Taylor was a good interview too. Yeah, if we're just going off quality of interviews, then I'd go Daniels, something like Campbell, and then I don't remember. Did Omar Spates? I watched Omar Spates did interview, but I don't remember how good he was. So yeah, we'll see. All right. Next question. Oh, Miss Let Alarm has a 5th question for us. Who do y'all think the team captains will be this year? Jaden, how many team captains? There's 4, right?
3.
So, 3.
There are 4 that go out for the coin toss. There are 3 that are the permanent team captains. Last year it was Ollie Gay, Mike Jones, and BJ Ojolari.
Yeah, because they were all defense. Jaden Daniels will be one. I'm
gonna go Will Campbell.
Yes, that makes sense.
And I'll go Mason Smith.
Yeah, I was gonna say it might be the inverse of last year, where it's all offense this year, whereas last year was all defense. I mean, the defense has a lot of great guys on it and everything, like you said, like Greg Brooks, Major Burns, guys like that. But something like that. Mason Smith, that's a good group. All right. LSU Lawyer wants to know the next 5 commits. I think that's asking a lot. And
I can give him a little go here.
Go ahead.
And look, we're going into that time of year where I think it's going to be somewhat rare if we see somebody pop in like the next week and a half and they get it out of the way before their official visits.
Yeah, that'd be weird.
So I'll go just maybe the 5 commits, the 5 guys that I would feel best about being committed by the start of their senior year. So they'll make a decision at some point after their official visits or whatnot. I'll go Joel Rogers, the 4-star safety out of West Feliciana. I will go Jelani Watkins, the 4-star receiver out of the Houston area. I think they sit in a good spot there. Just talked to Rory Williams, who's a big offense tackle target for LSU, and he named LSU his leader going into official visits. So Rory Williams, LSU sits in a good spot for. You can check out that full interview at thebengaltiger.com.
Yep.
It's 2.
That's 3. That's
is
3.
That 3?
That's 3. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. And then I'll go Tylen Singleton if he makes a decision before his senior year.
Like that.
And then Tylen Singleton's a 4-star linebacker out of Manny. And then let me go Wardell Mack. I think Wardell Mack, if he decides to make a decision
Yeah.
before his senior year. And Sam Spiegelman had an update on him earlier this month, so you can check it out on his profile. I would say those 5.
That's a pretty good 5. I
Pretty
think
good.
I'd be happy with that. Nola Fan 33, with the men's basketball roster completed, how do you feel they did in the portal? And then he says that he liked the guards and wings, but he thinks the bigs leave a little bit to be desired. I think that's very accurate. I think that's pretty on the money. I love obviously Jalen Cook, Carlos Stewart guards. Then you get Jordan Wright on the wing. I do wish. Obviously, it's hard because they did a self-imposed, scholarship ban on one of their scholarships. So they're only playing with 12, which, in theory doesn't feel like a lot, but in actuality, it's like, imagine if they could have added, another transfer player that could have potentially contributed or even been a rotation player. Like that feels like it's substantial. Also from a, injury perspective, if someone goes down, you're at 11 scholarship players. And then, the freshmen that they bring in, I think very well could redshirt. One or both could redshirt. So that puts you down even more. So it gets shallow pretty quick. I do wish they would have brought another big. That was something I felt like they kind of needed, even though I do think Will Baker's capable. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Guards, wings, I think they're gonna be fine. Will Baker can score the ball. Then they bring in that backup center who's from George Washington, whose name I don't have in my head right now. But yeah, it's a they did a fine job in the portal. They did about as fine of a job as you could ask. I think it's a better roster this year than they had last year, and that's the goal ultimately.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the 2 freshmen they have, and they didn't overdo it on freshmen by any means, but Mikey Williams is a guy that has really played well as a senior, and then Corey Chest, he's got great motor, he's got the length, he's got the size. He might not necessarily be somebody that contributes right away, maybe. Just get him in the weight room a little bit more, but yeah, I agree. I think the bigs are the biggest question. If they can get something out of Will Baker and Hunter Dean and guys like that, that would be huge. If those guys can elevate from where they played for kind of the majority of their career, that'd be massive.
Yeah, and I'll say Jalen Reed has to be a lot better at the 4, and then if you can slide him to the 5, that would be big. All right, Kyra Tiger asked, predict the top 3 rushing leaders next year. I'm high on. He says I'm high on Diggs. I'm also high on Diggs. For those who didn't read the transfer analysis story, I think he's a very good back. I think could very well be their starter. Him and Josh Williams. It comes down to me. Jaden Daniels was so far and away the rushing leader last year in terms of attempts goes, which I know that probably includes a couple sacks too, but still, it's hard for me to imagine Jaden Daniels going the entire season and him not being the leading rusher, because I think the rest will be running back by committee. So if we're looking at the one consistent game in, game out, is Jaden Daniels will rush for, let's say, 50 yards a game at least. And that puts him at 600 yards in the regular season. And
yeah, I think Jaden Daniels is your leading rusher again. Hopefully it's not as much as he did, this past year, but I do think he's going to be the leading rusher again. I would say Logan Diggs right after that. If Josh Williams is healthy and back to his normal self, I agree with Cairo. I think he's the 3rd leading rusher on the team. Maybe a dark horse, Caleb Jackson, maybe coming on strong, but we'll see. I think with how deep that running back room is right now, it's a lot to ask for a freshman to make that big of a jump.
Yeah, Daniels ended the year last year with 885 rushing yards. I think he'll be more around 600 or 650 or so this year, but that's still a pretty big number for a running back by committee to break. I think Diggs will have a chance in that range, but I'll go with Daniels. All right, you got the name on this?
They're
on the Matico.
Yeah.
Which top 150 players not committed here already does LSU have a legit shot at? Which one do you think we land?
Well, Dominic McKinley and Wardell Mack are 2 who are 5 stars or would be 5 stars at the rankings.
All the Louisiana ones.
Yep. Yeah. All the Louisiana top 150. So Tylen Singleton, I think, might be in there.
Yeah.
I do think LSU has a legit chance at Cam Coleman, the 5-star wide receiver out of Alabama, but I do think it's going to be tough to get him away from Auburn, I'll be honest. But
Yeah.
they're getting an official visit. Colin Hurley, that's one of the guys he's pushing for. And then Bryant Wesco, another 5-star for On3, is going to officially visit LSU. Seems like Oklahoma is kind of falling off in that recruitment. TCU's in there, Clemson's in there. I do think LSU has a legit shot at him. As I continue to scroll down the list here, you look at, and this is the On3 industry ranking list of top 150 prospects in case somebody asks later on. John Daniels, the 5-star offensive tackle, well, he's a 4-star on the On3 industry ranking, but John Daniels out of Pensacola, they have a legit shot at. Traylon Miller, they're locked in a LSU Texas A&M battle for him. He's the 4-star wide receiver out of Silsbee, Texas.
Anybody else?
Yeah, there's I'm almost done. Blake Ivy might be tough to pull out of Texas. He's the number 103 overall prospect, number 3 interior offensive lineman. He's out of League City, Texas. Goes to Clear Springs. He's going to be tough to pull out of Texas, but he does have Louisiana ties. He's got a ton of family down south, so they'll be in the mix there. They're going to get an official visit. LSU's expected to get an official visit from Texas A&M. Defensive line commit Dalen Evans as well, so you can count them as in the mix, and that one has a long way to go. He's going to take official visits in the fall as well. And then CJ Jackson, the 4-star edge out of Tucker, Georgia, LSU's in the mix for, without a doubt, on that front as well. Weston Davis, number 125 overall prospect. LSU is locked in a LSU A&M Bama battle. And then Caden Durham, the 4-star running back out of Duncanville, Texas, is right inside the top 150. LSU and OU battling it out for him, but he did just set a Michigan State official visit, but I still feel like it's an LSU-OU battle. And that wraps it up outside of Jeremiah McClellan, the 4-star wide receiver out of St. Louis. LSU's getting an official visit there, and obviously the ties with Robert Steeples and just the job Cortez Hankton's done recruiting him as well put LSU in the mix there.
Yeah. Iowa City Tiger fan has 5 questions. Number 1, Chapman was a good analyst to have on staff. Do you see BK finding a replacement this summer to help with the D line? I don't have an answer to that. I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Yeah. So the way usually these analysts and graduate assistants, the guys so Gerald Chapman was the interim defensive line coach after Jamar Kane left, and he obviously took over that role for Jamar while Jamar left, and Brian Kelly was looking for his spot. But this is kind of one of those deals where I think Jimmy Lindsey will have more of the say, because this is Jimmy Lindsey, Madhouse will kind of have more of the say, because this is the guy that's going to work hand in hand with him on the field, start to finish and all of that. And so I do think they'll find somebody. I mean, it's one of the premier analyst GA jobs that you can have out there in the country. I mean, you take this job and you can usually end up getting a full-time assistant. So they're going to have plenty of guys that are going to be in the mix. But at the end of the day, I mean, quite honestly, it is an analyst or GA job. So it's not something that is going to be, it's just not really going to get that big of headlines. But I do feel like they're going to certainly find somebody that, should be good or, very much up to the task.
Yeah. His second question was, can you give us the skinny of who replaced Lowry? I'm assuming it's Bo Lowry, the director of sports medicine. Do you have anything on that? Because I do not.
Yeah, so I don't really have anything on that. I know Brian Kelly mentioned it in I think the interview with Jordy Collada. And I'm looking, and he mentioned that they have their next, Bo Lowry. So I don't know if it's been officially announced or anything like that. The only thing I see on, LSUsports.net is Shelly Molinix, who's been in this role for quite some time. And I don't know if her, Yeah, it doesn't. She's the one I would think kind of running the show, at least right now. I don't know the answer to that, but she is the most senior person in that world. So right now, I think it's her show, but we've not seen anything announced as far as that goes.
Yeah, Iowa City getting in the weeds of LSU football here, analyst and medicine, important roles, but yeah. Which second stringer do you see starting by the season's end? I mean, besides Garrett Nussmeier, I'm just kidding.
Here we go. Fire up the Nuss bus, Hunter.
Oh man, just kidding. Backup, second string that could be starting. Oh Lord. This gets kind of bleak.
Yeah, this is hard because we saw so many guys out for spring too,
Okay.
especially on the defensive side, in the secondary.
Yeah, if we consider, I consider Ovia Gofu probably starting at Jack right now. There's a world where Braden Swinson passes him. I think there's a world where a guy like Deuce Chestnut, we don't know his role. Like you said, injuries make this a really tough question. Maybe Deshaun Womack gets on the field as a starter.
Because I could see that. I think defensively, Deshaun Womack is a really good pick. I will say maybe he's Lance Hurd. Maybe, he finds a way.
Yeah, maybe. We'll have to see what happens injury-wise as well. Which Louisiana 2024 football recruit might get a summer or fall offer? Wow.
Yeah.
Offer.
This is a really good question. LSU always seems to find these guys, and it's kind of changed over the years. We've seen them go a little bit later on multiple guys, but I think last year, could be wrong, but I think the only one was Dylan Carpenter.
Ashton Stamps?
No, Ashton Stamps got it. Well, he got a summer offer, so you're right on that. The summer versus fall thing definitely.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're going.
But he did say okay. I'll go.
I immediately thought of Stamps.
Yeah, no, that's a great example of a summer camp. Like that's how you want it to happen. Sometimes for Louisiana guys, you'd love to be on them way early, but I think a guy that for me continues to pick up steam. I'll give you guys two, one on each side of the ball, and look, I think Michael Turner, the wide receiver out of John Curtis, has gotten a lot of buzz. I think he is really thin. So I don't think right now they're going to move on him. Anthony Robinson out of Destrehan is a good prospect. He could earn an offer, but at the end of the day, too, LSU has Maurice Williams. They have Deshaun McBride. They're looking good for Joel Rogers. I mean, how many safeties do you end up needing, especially if you see Wardell Mack with position versatility? So the two I'll give you are Mitch Hodnett out of Monroe Sterlington. I actually had him in my prediction piece if LSU wanted to sign 5 offensive linemen and kind of as a little bit of a cover in case LSU doesn't get one of the other 3 uncommitted guys I had in there. But he's 6'5", 280. Kansas State's been really on him hard. He's a little under the radar, but he just seems like one of those mean, nasty kind of interior guys, might have some position versatility. And then finally, Gabriel Relaford out of Evangel in Shreveport. And shout out Shreveport. I was there last week for James Simon's spring game. And they just have so much talent. It's just sick right now what's going on in Shreveport, which led the NFL draft for Louisiana players. But he is at Evangel. He's about 6'3", 255. He's got an unreal wing. He's got an encouraging 100-meter time for a big guy like that too. And he had over 129 tackles. He was just disruptive as all get out. He was a guy that some people thought would be a linebacker, but he could be like a thick jack or maybe even a strong side defensive end, maybe even like a pass rushing defensive tackle. So he just picked up Texas A&M yesterday. Baylor, Ole Miss, and SMU are hosting him for an official visit this summer. And he's picked up a couple of other big offers. So he's kind of my if he camps, I think. I mean, I saw him physically in person, and I was like, wow, that guy looks like he should be in the SEC.
Yeah, that's always a good eye test. That guy looks like he should be in the SEC.
He probably should be in the
SEC.
Yeah.
Whenever you say that to yourself, he probably should be in the SEC.
Yeah.
Who is your sleeper in the 2024 class?
Well, I mean, I think sleeper right now, in a sense, because he is a 3-star across the board. Outside of rivals, is Devon Keys out of Aledo. I think he's a linebacker that stands just a shade under 6 foot, but he's got plus length. He's got good verified athleticism. He's been productive for Aledo. Power lifter, track guy, ran on the relay team at Aledo. He's a winner. His family is all not spread out, but in all across South Louisiana. So he's a guy that was really excited about being at LSU. He's going to be back here to camp with Matt House as well. I think he's a sleeper in the class, just from a rankings perspective. I think if you have an industry ranking of a 4-star, then I don't necessarily think you're a sleeper. But I'll go Devon Keys on that one, I guess. Yeah. And I assume that was a question for the actual 2024 commitments. So.
Yes, I assume so as well. 6'2" player asks, who would you see as the starting cornerbacks if the season started next week? I would go Denver and Zai. Denver Harrison, Zai Alexander, I think would be my picks.
I tend to agree as well. I know he mentioned that Malcolm, one of our subscribers, said look out for Welch. And look, I was actually rewatching the spring game the other night. I think there's credence to that, that LaTerrence Welch will have a decent role for LSU this fall. But I will say, I mean, they brought in Denver Harrison, Zai Alexander, and even J.K. Johnson for a reason too. So it's not a for sure thing, but I mean, look, LaTerrence Welch, if he gets back to truly back to what he was early in his high school career, he's got a chance to be special. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but I believe he's had 2 knee injuries now. So just a guy that has really grinded and worked it out, and is challenging to start, no doubt.
If LaTerrence Welch ends up being a really good starter for LSU, which I think he could be, but if he does, I have the screenshot of me the signing day morning. I think was it the February or December one? I don't remember which one it was.
I think it would have been February.
Whichever one it was. I had the whiteboard. I had my list of my top ones. LaTerrence Welch was at the top.
There you
go.
Then
this was before they got Harold Perkins, so it ended up being Harold Perkins 1, LaTerrence Welch 2 in my 2022 rankings. I loved him so much. So I'm just going to hold on to that. I'm waiting for it.
Nobody remembers when you're right on evaluations.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers.
Okay? I'll make sure they remember.
Nobody remembers.
I'll make sure they remember.
Coy Moore and Cardell for me. So just preparing you now.
They're going to remember I had Mason Taylor at 11th in that class.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to remember.
Shay's jeans are pretty skinny. But
that's what he asked. How skinny are Shay's jeans? Yeah. And Europe, who knows how those
joggers are getting some burn too.
Texas Tiger 2. How many more we got here? Well, we got about 7, 8 more, Billy. All right. Texas Tiger 2 asked about Bryant Wesco. Shay had him in his prediction piece. Billy followed suit. Is there growing confidence inside LSU ops that Wesco lands in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, and I'm not speaking for Shay. I would think Shay would have him still in the piece if he dropped it. That's just a guess, though. But I think there's growing optimism, and I think partly because OU, as of now, is not getting an official visit. So Clemson made a big impact on him with the offer. TCU's been recruiting him for a long, long time. And LSU has been making a big push. So if you're considering OU out, I would say it's Clemson, LSU, TCU. So I think your confidence is growing, and you can let the chips fall where they may as far as an official visit goes. I think Clemson has really made an impression on him. I think TCU has obviously been in there for a long, long time. Malcolm Kelly has been recruiting him forever. I'm not ready to completely count out OU because of the way and how hard Emmett Jones has recruited him. But yes, I do think there's some growing confidence that he could land at LSU.
There you go. Townsend 11 asked, LSU's return game was non-existent this past year. Are Pre and Parker legitimate options behind Anderson? It still seems too shallow. I wouldn't be worried about the depth of the punt and kick returner positions. I would just be worried about getting one that's good.
Yeah.
So if Aaron Anderson is one that's good, I don't think it matters if Pre and Parker are legit, but I think they are legit. I think Parker is going to be a perfectly serviceable punt and kick returner, punt returner mostly, but Anderson, if he steps in and he's legit, then the problems are solved.
Yeah, I think depth doesn't matter. Anderson should be good if he's healthy. Parker is going to be. I think he's going to be special. I know we've got some Kyle Parker fans on the board. He's just so smooth.
Yeah. Nola Tiger. He asked about softball.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I got nothing on that one. I did watch a little bit of it when I was out of town this past weekend. I watched them lose, and so there you go. J87. What was your initial reaction to the ESPN article naming Baker the top quarterback of the 2000s? I was surprised. I kept trying to guess who was going to be number one. Right. I was like, all right, could it be Burrow? And then it had him at 5. I was like, okay, I can kind of see it. And then Tebow was at 4, I think it was. Then Newton was at 2, and I was like, who is it going to be? Because Kyler was already gone.
Yeah.
And I just started going through, and I was like, they haven't done Baker yet. And I was like, it's going to be Baker. And sure enough, it was Baker Mayfield. So that caught me off guard.
I think for that one, and we don't need to spend too much time on it, but like you should have a national championship, right? I mean, it's a team game and all that, but like Cam Newton willed Auburn to that. You know, they had some good players too, but like Cam Newton willed him. Tim Tebow willed him. I mean, Joe Burrow, he was a massive piece. And without him, LSU doesn't win a national championship.
Vince Young was 3 on that list.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Bryce Young has a really good argument too. But I think all the guys from 2 to 5 have really good arguments, quite honestly. So yeah. I love Baker. I think Baker's story out of all of them, the only one that can kind of rival it, I guess Cam and Burrow can. You know, Cam was sent off to JUCO, and then Burrow, transferred and found a new home. But Baker starting as a walk-on is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Deshaun Watson was 6.
Yep.
I don't know how Trevor Lawrence was so low. I think Trevor Lawrence was at 11.
I agree.
Or something like I was like, all right. True Tiger 1979. If LSU is unable to get any tight end help through the portal, who do you think will step up, take the second tight end spot? Or do you think they will all split time and be used in certain situations based on individual strengths? I think B is probably the right answer there. I just don't think any of them are well-rounded enough to be like, all right, Mason Taylor here, you're on this side. I think Mark Way is the best blocker. I think McGohan has the speed and the athleticism, and I think Pimpton has the most receiver upside of the group. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the rundown for me.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to test some different guys out and kind of see who rises to the occasion. Mac Markway didn't play in the spring game, so with his injury history, I mean, you never know. Kamorian Pimpton is he's a pass catcher at this point. I mean, I don't think he'll redshirt because of how thin LSU is at tight end, but I mean, honestly, he could potentially use a redshirt in the sense of just pack a ton of weight on him and, go from there. Jackson McGohan, I liked what he did in the spring. He could get some burn as that number 2 tight end, but they are recruiting Connor Gilbreth, the Butte College JUCO tight end. It seems like that's who they hope is their number 2 tight end.
Yeah. Denim Tiger 90. Any idea on who women's basketball feels best about landing for 2024 class? I'll have some stories up on the 24 class for women's basketball very soon. Off the top of my head, I will say the battle for Jelani Cambridge is going to be really interesting. Number 1 player in the country because LSU is right in the mix with her. South Carolina is going to be on her. Like that, they're going to continue to stack up. If they can, number 1 classes in the country, and like they're going to keep being in the conversations for top players in the country every single year. So that's going to be real interesting to watch. I'll have a story up relatively soon on the 2024 class for LSU.
I'll just say they just feel best about landing the top 10.
So. Yes, all of them. Like they cast a wide net, man. They really just go after all the top players. Like, all right, who's coming? All right, Bam Osby. Who do you think will get 7 and 18 this year? If they even do it. 7.
Who do I think and who should? I'm going to go with who should because I don't want to be tied to a prediction on this. I Mason Smith, 18.
Oh my gosh. You know what? Just honestly, after everything that's happened, just make Denver Harris 18, just for the lulls, just to throw A&M off. Just be like, wait, what is happening here? But anyways,
I mean, I guess like 7 could be Malik.
7 could be Malik.
Could be Greg Burns.
Someone
Or Greg Brooks.
Greg Brooks. Someone convince Jaden Daniels to be number 7, just for the laughs. Just Jaden Daniels 7. His quarterback playing 7. Has that ever happened at LSU?
I mean, I'm sure it has.
In the 7 era, in the 7-18 era, that. So was it
Yeah,
last
no,
decade or two?
I don't think so.
So, but yeah, I'd go Malik 7 and 18 being some like Mason Smith or I don't know. That's a good one. Good question. Grape Swish, most impactful hire of the offseason, on field or off field? Assuming this is coaches, obviously. I'll throw it to you first.
Well, I mean, John Jancic is the most impactful on-field hire.
Yes, that's a promotion. That
yeah.
counts.
If the LSU special teams take a, turn for the better, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah,
obviously.
they also hired the analysts. Who I can't remember.
Bob Diaco. I think off-field, I mean, it's probably Bob Diaco.
Yeah.
Because their recruiting staff, there really hasn't been a shakeup, really. Hasn't been too much done on that one.
All right, 2 more. LSU. Is the Duncanville LSU connection real? Who is our main recruiter for that school? And then he has a second question, which I think we can answer afterwards.
Yeah, we'll find out if the LSU-Duncanville connection is real. And I had this list of LSU players' all-time signing classes through the years, and they did it by high school, which is pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool. I was about to ask like the Duncanville rundown here because I already know obviously Durham, January, like the players, the prospects, the Colin Simmons, stuff like that.
So they have not, from what I've seen, signed anyone from Duncanville ever. But
is the pipeline real, Billy?
That's what. So that honestly, and you try to separate every recruitment. Every recruitment's different.
Yeah.
And we saw that to an extent with a guy like a Javian Toviano or Deshaun Womack. Guys that LSU through the years hasn't necessarily landed. How do you kind of separate all that? And this Duncanville, class, 2024. So their targets are 5-star edge Colin Simmons, 4-star running back Caden Durham, 4-star defensive lineman Alex January, and 4-star defensive back Kadavian Dotson Walker, who, as we kind of talked about with safety position, LSU might be full. They might not even be able to take him. But one thing I've said is that LSU has never signed a player from Duncanville. They've kind of kicked around on some guys, and in the end, they haven't really gotten too close on them for the most part. Kerry Cooks is probably the main recruiter for that school. He is really the guy who leads the charge for the most part in Dallas. But LSU sends position coaches a lot of times to recruit their positions when it comes to nationally. If they can get one of, let's just say they can't take Kadavian Dotson Walker. If they can get one of the 3, if LSU can get Colin Simmons or Alex January, I'm ready to plant a flag and say that there could be pipeline potential. If they get Caden Durham, well, Frank Wilson will have done a terrific job beating out OU, and I don't necessarily know if he's a starter of a pipeline as much as the other 2 would be. So right now, until they land somebody from Duncanville, there's not a connection there. They're just doing a good job. They happen to be doing a good job with these 4 guys there right now. So if they can get one, that'd be huge. Frank Wilson also, I don't think through his LSU career has really signed a running back outside of the state of Louisiana. So it could be for a first for him as well.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Then with 15 recruits committed and 10 open slots, what are our remaining positions of need and who do we feel very good about jumping aboard? Okay, we've answered the second part of that, but
defensive line,
tackle.
Just get to start whipping.
Can never use enough
on the podcast. The defensive line, edge, interior, both huge positions of need. I think I think receiver is a position of need in this class as well. And as far as remaining, needs goes. I know they signed 4 at the position last cycle. But I think if you can get this last piece with a strong receiver class, then you're really in a good spot long term with depth at the receiver position. But defensive line is, I think, the biggest position of need. And they've already addressed safety, and they can get Joel Rogers for a lot of icing on the cake. We talked about next 5 commits earlier in the pod, so I'm going to kind of skip that. But Dominic McKinley is, need number one. If they can get Dominic McKinley, the 5-star defensive lineman from Acadiana, and if they can reel in a guy like a CJ Jackson from Tucker, Georgia, or Colin Simmons somehow on the edge,
there you go.
then LSU, I don't even care what they get the rest of the way, quite honestly.
I was going to say McKinley and Simmons, man, just pack it up. That's all we need.
Pack it up.
2-player signing class. Just let the rest go. All right. Last question. Irish Tiger 18. Other than recent on the field success, what is Georgia doing differently than everybody else, LSU as well, in recruiting that is getting them so much success? Yeah, I feel like I've just heard so much about Georgia the past 2 weeks.
Yeah. So this is one of those questions like, how much time you got, buddy? Because it's hard, right? LSU is sitting there routinely landing top 10 classes. They were in the top 5 last year. They've been in the top 5 here and there over the last few years, enough to be one of the premier recruiting schools in the country. But Alabama and Georgia are just doing it consistently at a different level. And I think we talk about alignment with Brian Kelly, and I think it's something that is still being fixed kind of from the Ed Ogeron days. But I think navigating this whole NIL space versus NIL in recruiting is something that LSU is still tinkering with. And we see them do a really, really, really good job in Louisiana for the most part. If they clean up the top 10 this year, it's, we know that LSU, the gate is closed in Louisiana. You can't come in here and take a recruit because Dominic McKinley, Wardell Mack, Tylen Singleton, those 3 right now, I would say, are the guys that are just so heavily sought after from programs that really want to make a big splash in Louisiana and obviously take them from LSU. If you can get those guys and then keep the rest of them in Louisiana on board, the gate is closed and that conversation can now end. But then nationally, and this is where I think Alabama and Georgia have things very, very organized, is it seems like, in my opinion, they can pretty much go into any school. And like we mentioned, Casey Poe, for example, East Texas kid, Oklahoma, Texas has been battling it out for a while. They've been recruiting him forever. Well, Bama jumped in there and, now considered the favorite for an East Texas kid. I just saw Terry Bussey last week, the number 1 athlete in the country. Alabama, they're right there in his recruitment. Georgia does a lot of that same stuff nationally. They're in it for Colin Simmons at Duncanville in a big way. And they've got plenty of national targets, but I just feel like there is, and maybe it is part of the winning and things like that, but there is just a little bit more alignment at both of those schools navigating the NIL space, name, image, and likeness versus the quote unquote NIL part of recruiting. So that is why I think they can do it just a touch above all these other programs across the country.
Yep.
Way to end it on a high note there.
There you go.
Look, LSU can very well sign a top 5 class this year. They might. If they can get Dominic McKinley, if they can get Wardell Mack, they can clean up in Louisiana, and then they can go out and find a way to get a Bryant Wesco or Cam Coleman at receiver. If they can get a Caden Durham at running back, they can go and clean up like they did along the offensive line, like Brad Davis did last 2 cycles. Some of their top targets are very highly rated, especially on 3. And linebacker, Tylen Singleton. Safety, you get Joel Rogers. If Robert Steeples can reel in another national corner like a Kai Bates, and then, maybe round things out with a Jalen Crawford. Even if Zion Ferguson goes elsewhere, that's one of the better hauls nationally. All those things add up, and you could be looking at a top 5 class. It's just a matter of how LSU finishes out that defensive line class and edge and things like that. But, you can't – they've done a good job really honing in on certain guys and, for the most part, being in there start to finish on a lot of these recruits. And, Ed Ogeron, it was a lot of wild goose chase type stuff. You knew that they were never going to get so-and-so. They were never going to get
Yeah.
so-and-so, but they were the last official visit or whatever. And it's just this staff does a much better job at like at least keep like aim small, miss small. Like that's kind of where they're at. So I like their approach. I still think they just are continuing to improve on the ground, so to speak. And I think as this NIL stuff continues to evolve, we'll they have another year like they do. We'll see it crank up a notch, and maybe LSU is beating out Alabama and Georgia for top classes.
We do have one question we didn't answer. Hunter Fournette asked if you could be any fictional character, who would it be and why?
So you've been thinking about this the whole podcast, but I already knew as soon as I saw the question. I'm going James Bond. I mean, the guy, secret agent, drinks martinis like they're water and doesn't appear to wake up hungover. Has a great life.
Great life.
Great life. I'll go James Bond.
Oh man. Okay, now I'm going between a bunch of different names in my head now because of movies. Since you did an action character, I'll just do one as well. I'll do John Wick then, so that way I could just win any fight.
There you go.
Immediately.
There you go.
That's it. There you go. All right. Over an hour podcast. Answered all your questions. I'll have them timestamped afterwards so we can easily navigate them. But hope y'all enjoyed it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Bengal Tiger On3. Subscribe to our YouTube channel right here. If you haven't already, so leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Leave us a like. We appreciate all of the support. We'll be back someday soon. I'm hoping to get an interview here. So keep a lookout for that. But until then, for Billy and Body, I'm Matthew Bruni, and we will talk to y'all later.